Welcome to the S.J. Child Show, where a little bit of knowledge can turn fear into understanding. Enjoy the show.
Hello. Oh, thank you so much for joining me here today, especially the audience and the viewers, and my incredible guest who this is our first time getting together like this. And I always find that this is my favorite way to meet someone and connect to someone is that authentic, organic, getting to know you session kind of thing. So thank you so much for your time.
We've been wanting to do this for, I don't know how many years now, but we finally have made it happen. So I'm excited.
Yes. Chase each other down just at the right moment.
Love it.
Well, I'm SJ Child, Sarah Bradford. I host the SJ Child Show podcast, where I talk about and speak to neurodiverse individuals and families, experts, all sorts. And we dive into the world of neurodiversity, education, parenting. And today I have a really special guest. This is Tamika. And I've been following her journey, like she said, for a few years now as well. And it's always amazing when you are able to connect with people in the same space and feel that, just like you said, you were born ready. You have this passion, this drive. Let us get to know more about you and get to know you better. Please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about why you're here today.
Okay, so my name is Tamika Lecheé Morales, and I run an amazing nonprofit organization after my own heart, I always say. It's called the Autism Hero Project, and the genesis behind it was my autistic son. Back in 2015, June 4th, 2015, you never forget those important dates. My son was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder and ADHD. And 2 years later, when I kind of say that I got to all the level and stages of grief, I came into acceptance, and I started a nonprofit. And the Autism Hero Project does so many great things. We started out in one pillar, which was purchasing medical insurance for children on the autism spectrum, because we started at first in the state of Illinois. And unfortunately, back then, the state of Illinois didn't basically give families on Medicaid access to autism therapies, specifically applied behavior analysis, ABA therapy. And I just thought it was honestly criminal that, every children's journal, every doctor, every psychologist, everyone is saying, these are the therapies your child needs. This is the gold standard therapy. But, I was fortunate. I had a job, medical insurance that covered it, but so many families didn't. And, so it was a barrier. And so we decided to be that financial bridge to cover, children on the autism spectrum who didn't have access to all the therapies that we believe they needed to thrive and strive and reach their full potential. And then since then, we're 7 years in the making. We have expanded so much, where a couple years back, we started doing education scholarships, because we know that autistic children are going to become autistic adults. And we know that there's this huge cliff at the age of 22 where there's such a lack of services out there. And so we started giving out education scholarships that are not just for university, because we know not all of our children thrive in, the college bound, but they have, whether it's culinary or vocational or cybersecurity, or there's so many other lanes, arts and theater, that our children really, hyper focus and do amazing things. And so we didn't want to limit it to just university. So these higher education grants are just for any adult who's looking to honestly find a talent or hone in on something that they love, a passion that they have, and be able to close that unemployment gap that our autistic, families have, where it's 80 to 85% of underemployment or unemployment rates for, our autistic individuals. And so we wanted to help close that gap. And we do a whole lot of inclusive events, raise a whole lot of autism awareness. We believe you should be able to come as you are, whether that's theater shows. So we honestly sponsor sensory theater. We sponsor basketball, Windy City Bulls out of Chicago. Obviously, we, baseball games, sports events, holiday events, inclusive events. And then over the last 4 years, almost 5 now, we've also been sponsoring first responder training. And that has become a huge pillar of ours, paying to sponsor police departments and hospitals and fire departments to get trained on how to deal with our population and de-escalate and prevent crises. And so, so we've done a lot in 7 years.
Lots of projects and so many families impacted by all of these efforts put in. It really all does start with that experience that you have at home, and you see that struggle that you're having, and that other families don't even know how to look for help or how to ask for help. And it's heartbreaking to think that. And that's why I love that we're both doing these amazing community service projects, if you will, to really just help, not only help the community raise their awareness, but help create a place that we can send our children to someday.
100%.
Right? And that really embodies the special kind of perception that you need to have to be with them. And I think that that's important to kind of clarify for people, is that it all comes down to your perception. Where are you going to give in your heart, your mind, whatever, the space to learn more, become more educated and more, like you said, it takes time to take that acceptance journey. Absolutely. And it comes with so many ups and downs. And there is nothing better, though, than finding your community. What did you, there must be some kind of inspiration, or where did you maybe find some community that helped you understand you were not alone? I know I didn't mean to bring the tissue box, people, but
it's funny. My vice president and we just released a video at our gala. Every year I produced this documentary of where we're at and what we've been able to accomplish in the year. And it's funny because we immediately talked about when we got our diagnosis. And so she was fortunate that she had a lot of friends that had children on the spectrum. So she immediately had a village, she had her tribe. And that's so important, right? Where I honestly only knew one person. And that one person didn't even live in the same state, who was a friend of mine. But she was the first person I called eventually when I could talk, right? And so I created my village.
Yeah.
That's really what I did. And it's funny because we were just talking about this story because I wrote a book. I've written a few book, kind of writings in this space. And this is my last book, called For the Love of Autism. And it has Dr. Temple Grandin. It has Dr. Carrie Magro, Eileen Lamb, Andrew Arbo. It has all these famous autistic influencers. That. And but what's funny is my tribe was immediately my closest friends. And it took me almost 2 years to tell our family that we had an autistic child, about the diagnosis. And it took me, that's almost that long to even tell my closest friends. I just couldn't talk about it without getting so emotional.
Yeah.
And so we were just laughing because we started a book club with our church group. And we were just kind of recounting the story, how she was telling them that it was, that the way that they had all found out was because I put a PowerPoint presentation together.
I love it.
That's the teacher in me, because I'm a teacher, I'm an entrepreneur, but I put this PowerPoint presentation together because I figured it took me so long to wrap my head around it that I didn't want them to take 2 years to do that, right?
Yeah.
So I put a PowerPoint presentation together. And in this presentation, I talked about, the data, the prevalence, how, what are the symptoms, the signs, what they believe the research shows, but really how to support, my legendary kid and myself.
Yeah.
And it was such an emotional, like all of us were all together. And they became my immediate tribe. They were the first ones and none of them had an autistic child. But, I was taking classes at night, because I was in the middle of, beyond my master's degree and doing all this stuff. And they would babysit, they were just like everything to me. And then eventually, through my son's therapies, they had support groups. And then I would go to them. And honestly, in the beginning, I was like, okay, it was amazing to hear, like, obviously where my child was and, what I could expect. But at the same time, it actually was killing my soul to hear some of these stories that I could only take so much.
Yeah.
Right. Because I'm taking on my own stuff. But then, I felt like an empath and I was taking on their stuff and I wanted to help everybody. And it was like, my husband is like, Tamika, this is very unhealthy for you. Like, I just couldn't like be all things to all people. And my own self-care was kind of going out the window. And eventually, I kind of built my community through the Autism Hero Project. The more stuff we did, the more families came and they shared theirs. And we honestly, the beauty about our nonprofit is that so many of our families have become our closest friends.
Yeah. And
we know that we can call each other and, we can be there for one another and we can, like our latest video, one of the moms say, you call one of them up and we're like, immediately, do you need tequila? Do we need to go beat somebody up? Like, do we just need to go mani petties? Like, what do we need to go do?
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that. It really is so important that you, and, kind of, as you had said, it's like this isolating journey at the very beginning. I was really lucky. My husband had a sister with Down syndrome. So he had already grown up in this like special mind space, this way to treat special, people with Down syndrome and autism. And so that was nice. I mean, he didn't know obviously how to be a dad to an autistic son. So it takes just a journey of trial and error and living. But what a beautiful journey it's become. And since then, our whole family has received our diagnoses, and we understand that we're all on the spectrum in our family. And that really brought us close together, closer than I could have ever imagined or expected, especially with my husband, when we both kind of were able to say, wow, this 20-year friendship is just even more than that. It is this like meeting of minds that just was meant to be. And I feel that way about you and about the connections that I find, like kindred spirits. We all go through this journey, and while we're at this process, it feels so lonely and so scary and so sad. And it's not until some years later when we can reflect and when we meet people like each other that we're like, oh yes,
there's so much beauty.
This is our heart.
That's exactly what I wrote about when we wrote about For the Love of Autism. I mean, these are honest, raw stories from autistics, parents, mothers, fathers, because there's such a lack of men speaking about their, journey and how they're navigating, this for themselves. But, sibling stories. I mean, we have it all in here. Autistic interpretations. They have such an amazing following, and they're just so amazing to Jessica, their daughter and sister. And so it's just been, honestly, I always say that, like, because we're so busy focused, like as a system, right? And there's so much systematic change that needs to happen. But because people are just so focused on the milestones and the perceived timelines that people should meet these milestones, right? The fact is that there is so much beauty in autism, but we're so focused in what the world has deemed as deficiencies, right?
Yeah.
These timelines versus, that I think they're just not living in the present to see and feel the beauty of what is right in front of their eyes. And it's funny because when you look at neurotypicals and you see all the movies and you see all these social, influencers on social media, and you see all these people and everybody's trying to do everything possible to stand out, right?
Yeah.
To be unique and to be different. And yet our own children don't even need to do that. They're just
So true.
different that
Yep.
way. And yet they just want to fit in and they don't want to be standing out. It's like the whole opposite. And I'm like,
So crazy.
why fit in when you can stand out? Right. And it's like, you don't need to change. It's not you, my love, who needs to change. It's not you.
Yeah.
It's that.
I love that. In fact, I do these daily today's missions on my Facebook page every day that just kind of give everyone a little bit of quote of a day to try to live by.
I see them every day. I say,
I love it. I love it. And the other day, I think was, be yourself. They'll adjust. Just be you. They'll adjust.
Absolutely.
And that's it. That's just it. And, I think we all, through experience, through life, through all our journeys can reach that point. And for the people that we need to support along the way that might not reach those kinds of feats, then we support them in the best way we can by supporting their strengths, by, lifting them up, by their love of what they love to do. What are some things
what brings them joy?
Exactly. If you don't mind talking about your son a little bit, what are some things that he loves? What are his special interests?
So I have to say, Legend is really funny, like sarcastically funny. And he loves, he's a YouTube freak, right? So he loves YouTube. The typical things that boys his age, teenagers, early teenagers like. They like, gaming, and they like YouTube. And, he's really no different in that aspect. We just have to kind of control how many hours. But he's really funny, and he's constantly coming up with these dry jokes that, I find really funny. And we're a very sarcastic family. I'm from New York. My husband's from Boston. And so we are just sarcastic by nature. And he's also very sarcastically funny. Obviously, timing is really important. And so he'll be very sarcastic with a teacher or with another student. And it's like, we got to teach you when that's appropriate and when not appropriate. Right? But he's just trying to always be funny. And I think that's just a beautiful trait that he has. I mean, his journey is hard in the sense that, the spectrum is so wide, right? And so he has what we would consider an invisible disability, right? Like if to look at him, you wouldn't necessarily know. It would be like his, talking to himself because he's huge echolalia, right? The vocalizations, the repeating, right? Or him singing to himself, or him incorporating himself in some of his scripting, right? Mm-hmm. And stuff like that. So you wouldn't at first really notice it, but after, if you observe, you will, right? But, it's things that he's in, he just started high school this year and middle school. Am I allowed to swear?
Yeah, right.
Right. And I'm an educator. So middle school was really bad. It was hard. There was a lot of bullying and a lot of unnecessary, I wanted to go down to the school and beat some asses. That's how bad it was. And so, and they just couldn't appreciate, that's how he self-regulates. Right. And so it's that, just teaching others that, what, he's not bothering you. You can still befriend him. It's not, so it's just that. And I think, the earlier we can educate children, that's kind of why I wrote a law in the state of Illinois as an educator, before we take a day off for a holiday, whether it's, Veterans Day or, Columbus Day or Christmas, we teach around those holidays. And so I wrote a law that passed in the state of Illinois, making, April, the first week of April, Autism Acceptance Week. And we did that purposefully because then it forces, school districts and businesses and organizations to teach about acceptance and inclusion. And, my whole idea behind it was we got to teach our youth now because they really are our future, right? And if they can learn about how to be compassionate, empathetic, how they can, make friends with someone who's diverse than themselves, then, it's going to make for a much more accepting world. And it won't seem like such a, nuance to see someone who is maybe talking to themselves or flapping their hands or walking on their tippy toes and talking, or, just these things that some of our autistic children do. And so,
Yeah. It's so interesting because I have this situation that happened over the last probably 3 years. I think about 3 years ago, I ordered a bunch of noise canceling headphones, and we sent some off to like an event that was in town, and then we kept some. And everywhere we go, my son loves to wear them. He loves to wear his headphones. And I didn't realize it until maybe a few times in, but we get a different response from people when he's wearing his headphones. When he wasn't wearing them, I'd often get the look of, what the heck and whatever else is going on. But when he has his headphones on, I can see this softness in people. I can see this better understanding. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's an identifier. And, there were times where my husband and I struggled with, well, do we need to get him a vest that says I'm autistic? Please be kind. Do we need to and we, the same way you did, came up with all of, these books and safety kits and all of these things that we implemented in our own community. And just for that same reason. We want to just be at the store, having a grocery store without having to explain why we are who we are. We're just people walking down the aisle. Like, why do we need to explain what kind of behavior we're having that you don't understand or
and
give us?
Children don't want to be some of our children don't want to be a walking billboard. Just why don't you just show kindness?
Yes.
Why do I have to have a label for you to be kind or for you to look at me all of a sudden more?
It's a double-edged sword, isn't it?
Right,
Really
it is. It's like, yeah, it really is. And it's hard because, some people, will wear their, will proudly speak up and self-advocate. But then there's some who, they don't want to do that. And it's their prerogative. They're the autistic. They can make whatever decision they want. But I kind of agree. Like, they shouldn't have to be a walking billboard for you to show kindness.
Right.
Like, that should just be intrinsically, as a society. It doesn't cost you anything to be nice.
A human law.
The benefit of a doubt, Yeah. It just doesn't.
Absolutely. And, you and I know, especially with your education background and things like that, right now 1 in 36 is the number of diagnosed autistics in the United States, of children that are diagnosed. Now, those numbers don't include, let's be real, undiagnosed, obviously, underdiagnosed, underserved communities, females, so many. In your opinion, and people, this is not fact, data, or anything you need to take, but what do you think the numbers are closer to?
So, I was a national director for an autism cares organization very recently. And so it's funny because it's very hard for me to answer that. And I'll tell you why. When the DSM-5 changed, right? We went from, the 5 classic autism cases that they used to, have as autism to this big spectrum, right? And we know that autism doesn't come alone, right? Most of the time, autism has another co-occurring comorbidity, now known as co-occurrings, that come along with it. And so autism really does, they say, if you've met one child with autism, you've done exactly that. You've met one child with autism, because it really does manifest differently in every individual because of these other co-occurrings, right? Whether it's like in my son's case, autism and ADHD, autism and epilepsy, autism and apraxia, autism and OCD, autism and sensory processing disorder. Like there's some people have 2 and 3 diagnoses,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
And so it's really hard. And then I know that there's this fight within the community, which really gets me, really even outraged,
So sad.
more
Yeah.
sad, because instead of us coming together, to raise awareness together, to get our needs met together between employment and housing and disability, and accessibility and medical and all this other stuff, we're fighting with each other about within the community that we shouldn't be doing that.
Absolutely.
About whether, high support needs versus, less support needs, and how, they don't want autism to be called a disability, but it is a disability, and disability should not be a shameful word, and it should not be a bad word, because it's not. It's, the environment that disables people. It's not them themselves, so I feel very strongly about this, and very strongly about this. And so I just feel like it's hard for me to answer that question, because number one, I'm obviously not a medical professional, but I will say that we know that the numbers are not exact.
Yeah.
Because there's people who still don't even have access to a diagnosis, or they're waiting 1 and 2 years on a wait list, or they don't have the financial means, right? So the numbers are definitely not completely accurate. But then on the flip side, Sarah, there are people who are self-diagnosing themselves. And because maybe they don't have access, or because of their, for their parents, it may have been a taboo, or they just weren't educated. There's so culturally, I'm Latina. Yeah. That's very cultural, right? There's a lot of things, right? But I think too, some people are self-diagnosing themselves who are not autistic. And that's just, I'm just going to be honest, like, and so as someone who has worked with ADOS, which is the instrument, right? And who has worked with cards and all these, tools in the field that I was in, and who had taught worked with so many classes on this, like, you're not a mod 5, which is the adult testing. As much as you say you are, you're not. So I think, I think it's hard for me to say that. And I speak as a non-medical professional.
Oh, I love that. I'm glad.
I just want to be honest. I see so many people who we know are and are not diagnosed. Yeah. And then we see people who claim that they are, that we know for a fact that they're not.
Oh, that's really interesting. Wow. And I guess with a lot of exposure to the community itself and to the families and things, and you would get that perception and view of that so many don't. Well, I think I have like 3 minutes left, and I am excited to hear about what's to come. And I mean, I know obviously you're taking this all the way to Congresses and Senates and things and everywhere it needs to be. What is Autism Heroes Project next step that we can check out?
So I'm excited because we have a first responder documentary that I just produced, and we're going to release it. I believe the date is November 16th. It's going to be a public viewing with legislation in the room, police chief, Angel Sense, police officers who have autistic children who are in this documentary. And we're going to really work to mandate, certain states already have mandated autism training, but we want to make this documentary part of police officer school, like the academy, where before they even get out on the street to police, that they understand what good policing and these signs to identify autism, to avoid what could be the worst scenario, which we've seen so much of that just this year alone, if you've been following what's going on in the community. And this is something that's very important to us. So we're working with legislation, and we're going to make mandated, and, we start in one state and then we take it across the nation. And then later this year, November is my birthday month, and the audiobook for the Love of Autism, with a lot of the authors who have recorded their own chapters.
Oh, wow.
Now, and you can find the book right now on Amazon.
Beautiful.
And then the audiobook will be coming out soon too. So a lot of great things that we're doing. I would invite everybody to go to autismheroproject.org to kind of learn more about us, get involved. We have social media. We have like 70, almost 75,000 followers on Facebook. We're on LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Subscribe to our channel. You can watch some of the most amazing videos about the work that we do. The documentary for first responders won't be up there until November after we unveil it publicly, but at least you'll get to know what we do in the community, and we're expanding. And so
I'd love that.
we're excited about what's to come.
Oh, thank you so much for being my guest today, Tamika. And like she said, please go to autismheroprojects.org. You can also go to sjchilds.org to go find out more information about me and connect with us both.